This episode is brought to you by NBA on Prime. The NBA on Prime is back with an exciting week of Emirates NBA Cup action. The knockout rounds begin with quarterfinal doubleheaders on Tuesday and Wednesday night. Then it's a semifinal doubleheader on Saturday. And it all culminates with a championship game next Tuesday night, only on Prime. If you're not a Prime member, sign up for a 30-day free trial to get started today. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
This episode is brought to you by McAfee.
Yes! Playoff tickets! Just need to click here and... Wait, what? Fake site? Good thing McAfee threw the red flag. That would have been $400 gone.
McAfee blocks risky sites so you don't pay for seats and other things that don't exist. Plans start at just $39.99 for your first year. That's cheaper than parking on game day. Learn more at McAfee.com/online protection.
Welcome to DSC's Campfires with Larry Weissoon, a unique blend of hunting, fishing, wildlife conservation, and the outdoor lifestyle. DSC's Campfires is brought to you by DSC, Conservation, Education, and Advocacy. Hornady, accurate, deadly, dependable. Taurus, award-winning revolvers and pistols. Stealth Vision, high-tech, precision-driven equipment for today's modern hunter. Vineyard Max, deer attractants created for the aroma of success, game feeders, and other hunting products. Red 55 Winery, signature wines from Emmy Award-winning country artist Miranda Lambert, owned by Rick and Beverly Lambert. And the Choctaw Hunting Lodge, home of some of the finest hunting in North America. Now, here's Larry.
Pour yourself another cup of coffee and sit back and relax for a little bit, and allow me to tell you a hunting story about this year. Welcome to the DSC Campfire. I really appreciate you being with us. It's hunting season, still going on, particularly in Texas, and will until about mid-January, and then because we have the managed land deer permit system set up in Texas, which allows hunters to hunt on properties that are managed with permission of the landowner through the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. Those hunting seasons, which allow for a specific number of bucks and does to be taken off that property, runs till the end of February. So a lot of good hunting left to be had here in Texas. And if you're not from Texas, you're welcome to come down. There's all kinds of hunting opportunities through outfitters and ranchers and all those other kind of good things. So a lot of the good things going on. But what I thought I'd do today is just tell you about a story or maybe a story or two about a deer I recently took. Let's talk a little bit first. I kind of alluded to and mentioned a buck that I shot in Oklahoma on the Choctaw Hunting Lodge. Now, Choctaw Hunting Lodge, as you've heard me say before, is owned by the Choctaw Nation. It is a total of 44,000 acres, contiguous acres, down kind of the southeastern corner of Oklahoma. 22,000 acres of that they lease out to hunting groups who are under a very strict management program. The remaining 22,000 acres is what they hunt commercially through the Choctaw Hunting Lodge. Now, within the boundary of that 22,000 acres is something over 1,000-acre high fence. The high fence was set up there years ago because they wanted to bring in some genetics from white-tailed deer and raise some big whitetails in the pen. Some of those deer have been there ever since. We're talking about at least maybe 8-9 years ago, maybe even longer than that. And that was before the days of Dusty Vickery, who with his wife Nicole now runs that operation in a very efficient, proficient, and fun manner to where it's one of my favorite places on earth. Having a lot to do because of them, but also because of the land that's there. They're mountains, if you will, kind of big rolling hills, kind of like the Appalachian Mountains in some areas, covered with a variety of trees from oaks to pines with a little bit of cedar and deep valleys, just absolutely some of the finest game country I've ever been into, particularly for white-tailed deer and now wild hogs as well too, but wild turkeys, it's the eastern wild turkey, and then they have an ever-increasing bear population. I think you might have heard me here talk about David and Edgar Cotton taking bears back in October of 25. Unfortunately, that's when I was in the hospital trying to determine what all was going on with me and all those kind of good things. And that kind of leads up to this first story that I want to tell. I had pericarditis, which means there was a lot of fluid around my heart. They'd gone through surgery, or I'd gone through surgery, and they removed that. And I was kind of under house arrest for several days where I couldn't really do anything. Finally went back to the surgeon and the heart specialist, and they said, yeah, I think you're good for the time being. And that's what I wanted to hear, because I got back home, drove home from College Station, where I live, about 40 miles away, packed my gear, and got ready to go to the Choctaw Hunting Lodge the next morning. Now, that's about a 7-hour drive from where I live. I'd been invited to come back up and hunt the Choctaw by Jesse Baird. Jesse heads up to some extent the PR, media, and several other positions, if you will, with Avient, which is the world's largest polymer producer there is. They solve problems, quite frankly. You can't imagine all the products that polymers are involved in, and everything from and anything having to do with bows, crossbows, pistol frames. Oh my God, things to do with your ATV, your car, crossbows. The list is just almost endless. But they also came up with this rapid heat release and barrel system, which basically starts with, as you've heard say before, they kind of mill down the barrel to where it's primarily land and grooves, apply a very special proprietary, I'll get it spit out here in a minute, ceramic, over which is a proprietary type of a polymer, and it makes that barrel unbelievably stout, stiff, lightweight compared to metal of the same diameter, and also extremely accurate. Now, one of the beauties of it is you cannot heat the inside of that barrel no matter how many shots you put through it. It's been absolutely amazing. We've run many shots through it as fast as we could, then tried to shoot for accuracy, and at 500 yards with 7mm PRC with Hornady Precision Hunter ELD-X 175 grain bullets, put shots in the same hole. So it's an absolutely amazing barrel. I've got one on a Mossberg Patriot Predator, of course, it's 7mm PRC, and so I was there as a guest of Avient, trying to help them where we can with introducing them to certain to various manufacturers. I got involved thanks to Mr. Jim McQuerry, a very dear friend for a long time, and Jim introduced me to the Avient folks and the Avient products, and I really like what they do and how they do things. So that's how I happened to came to be on the Choctaw. Got there a day late that afternoon, did not hunt. I shot my rifle just to be sure it was still shooting where I wanted it to, and of course it was the same hole as where I'd shot it the last time at 100 yards. Again, I say that accuracy on those barrels with the Hornady ammunition is unbelievably accurate. Of course, it's topped with a Stealth Vision. That one is a 5x20 by 50, or 5x20 by 50. I think it's SVT, if I'm not mistaken, scope. It just absolutely great optic. If you're not familiar with it, please try to get to where you at least know what we're talking about, and give it a try, if you will. It's stealthvision.com. It's how you can learn more about those. So there I was. I got in and hunted the next morning with Jim McQuerry. Jim had not yet killed a deer, and I took the opportunity to try to sit with Jim and also try to film him for our Sportsman's Life TV show, which I will tell you that we were able to accomplish. Jim was shooting a Ruger 77 7mm PRC, where basically the same thing had been done, where the barrel had been milled down and the Avient process technology applied by I think it's Thunder Valley Precision up in Pennsylvania that did that barrel. It too was topped with a Stealth Vision scope and 175 grain Hornady ELD-X Precision Hunter. First afternoon sat with Jim, saw numerous deer, but really nothing that really kind of turned his crank. We were looking for a really nice typical. Now, I mentioned that it's a high fence, which allows us to hunt before the regular Oklahoma deer season would open. And it's way over 1,000 acres. It is unbelievably habitat. Some of it's so thick you can't even crawl through. All those kind of great things. Not necessarily an easy hunt, but Jim and I sat between a feed area and a water hole, or water tank that they'd set up for the critters on one side of that particular property, and saw several really nice deer, including a couple of outstanding, as I should say, bucks, but not what Jim was looking for. Jim was looking for trying to shoot the biggest whitetail deer antler-wise that he'd ever done so. There's also quite a few elk in there and a few bison and a few axis deer and fallow deer, and it's one of those areas that they can hunt throughout the year, as I mentioned. And because it's under high fence, it doesn't require all the different licenses that you might require, the tags. There's a special license that once you get there that Dusty and Nicole can help you get from the state of Oklahoma. Sat there, looked at several deer that afternoon, didn't see anything that we wanted, went back, had a great meal. Nicole Vickery heads up the staff of everything having to do with the lodge when you get right down to it. And the meal was outstanding. It was actually some oryx that had been taken off the ranch were not too terribly long before this. Before I got sick, I was there with Dusty as well, too, for him to shoot a meat animal. And outstanding meal. A lot of talk that night, talking with old friends that were in camp as well, Jesse and Jim and several other people. And, of course, get up the next morning. We hunt the next morning and really don't see a whole lot that we're looking for. Come back in, get a bite to eat, make a couple of rounds just to go look around a little bit at habitat and hopefully see some animals, and get back in the deer stand that afternoon in the ground blind. And, again, see several really nice bucks, but really nothing that we're looking for. Had a few bull elk all around us. And so next morning, we'd do the same thing. And good thing about it was we saw a couple of deer. I saw one off in a distance, but he never would come in. And I thought if he did, huge 10-point that Jim might be willing to take. And if he didn't take him, then very possibly I could get on to him a little bit later. Went back out that afternoon after a meal and didn't really spend a whole lot of time at camp other than just to shoot guns a little bit. And got back in there, and we hadn't been there very long, and this one buck came in. What would have been, I think he had maybe a basic 6x5 frame or whatever, but real massive. I looked over at Jim, and he was wearing his... wasn't wearing it, but he was carrying his Lucky Vest, which is the same vest, an orange and green reversible vest that he wore when he hunted with me almost 40 years ago in Texas, and he's worn it on most of his hunts. He kind of looked down at it, looked back at me, and he kind of nodded back and forth. I knew he was going to shoot, and Jim shoots as soon as that deer gave him position to do so, and he goes down, and absolutely fabulous deer. I'm sure he'd scored in the 170s or either low 180s, something like that. But great deer. And of course, Jim was beside himself. We got some footage for the show, and we got some photographs for Jim to use in articles and all that kind of thing, and to show off among friends while that rack and caper at a taxidermist. So the next morning we got up, and I suggested to Jim he wanted to shoot a hog. I said, why don't you go sit in a different blind? I'll go sit where I normally do. And I did, where we had been, and Jim unfortunately did not see any hogs that morning. We came back in, and Dusty were about to come back in, and Dusty picked me up, and we made a round, and guess what? We found this absolute monster buck. I mean, this buck was absolutely huge. He was bedded in some thickets where we could not get close to him. I thought about it, I said, man, that'd be an absolutely perfectly big, monstrous deer for Jesse Baird. So I headed back to the lodge, tried to talk Jesse into taking this deer if we could find him again. And I said, we're going to make another round. I was looking over to Dusty, and Dusty was nodding his head yes. So Jim and Dusty and I, along with Jesse, got in the vehicle, their little ATVs, Jesse and Dusty in front, and me in the back with Jim, and we start looking for this deer, and lo and behold, we spot him, but He was in an area, again, in such a great thicket that there's no way you could just see pieces of him. They tried to put a stalk on him. The wind changed. The deer got up, ran away, and Dusty goes, I think I know where he's going. He said, let's get in. We'll make a long circuitous route, come back in from the backside, get this wind in our face, see if we can get in there a little bit closer. And they did. They did exactly that. And guess what? The deer spotted him again and was gone again before they could do anything. So we went to another spot, and he said, let's just walk through this area and see if we can't find this deer. He said he generally bids here. He said, I've been seeing him here in the past. And so I asked him, I said, you mind if I go along? I'd love to get footage of what's going on. So I said, I'll promise I'll trail behind. I won't cause any problems. And if anything, y'all see. So we took off, and next thing I know, before I could even get the camera, I couldn't see any deer at all. But I saw that Dusty and Jesse obviously saw something, and I saw Jesse raise his rifle. He was using a 22 Creedmoor with an 80 grain ELD-X Hornady load. A little bit light, I thought, for deer, quite frankly, and other critters, but I still learned a very valuable lesson not to discount anything that comes out of Hornady. But in terms of bullets and in terms of ammunition, we made a little stock. All of a sudden, as I said, the rifle goes up. I'm trying to crawl in behind him so I can maybe shoot over his shoulder. By the time I get there, Jesse is shot, and as I'm crawling up behind him, he turns around and hands me the rifle, and he says, Larry, shoot that deer, look over at Dusty, and he goes, Larry, shoot that deer. And at that point, I saw a spot of brown. We were in a bunch of blowdown covered with briars and just really dense and thick to where, oh my gosh. Well, then finally I moved around a little bit, never could see the deer's head. I moved around a little bit. I could see what I knew to be a shoulder. And I looked back, and Jesse and Dusty both were going, please shoot, please shoot. Well, I found there's about a 6-inch rectangle, if you will, probably about 4 inches wide and about 6 or 8 inches long, right on the deer's shoulder. I've taken a lot of deer, so I knew the deer's anatomy, knew where his spinal cord was and relative to that high shoulder shot. And I got a little bit of a solid rest, pushed the safety forward, pulled the trigger, and as soon as I did, the deer went down, and I knew didn't think he was going to get back up. So we were about 50, 60 yards away, so we started walking in that direction, and Dusty and Jesse are just to my right, and I'm going to where my deer's down, and still had not seen the deer's head. And I finally get within about 15, 20 steps of this deer, and I look over there, and here's this absolute monster, more points than I could count, wider than I could ever imagine, more massive, just an unbelievable buck. And for just a little bit there, I thought, well, that must have been the buck that Jesse shot. He got up, and I hit him and killed him. And I turned around to look at Jesse and Dusty, and guess what? They're looking down at a very, very nice, long-time, back-split 10-point, just a gorgeous deer. I look back at that deer that I was approaching on to get a better look at on the ground, and they go, Larry, that's your deer. And I'm not one for a loss of words very often, but as I even got closer to this one, I realized that this deer was an absolute monster. I mean, I just could not believe that I had taken a deer of this size or magnitude. Now, I got up there, and I'm still unbelievable, standing at the deer's side, they congratulating me. I'm not saying a word because I can't even think of what to say. And finally I said, oh my gosh, thank you. And then I thought, oh my God, we got to get pictures, and we got to get a little bit of video. We don't have anything of this for Sports and Life, so I did a little bit of an interview for the camera to run for the TV show, the digital TV show on Carbon TV and on our YouTube channel, and then we started taking photographs, and I'm just in total awe of the size of this deer in terms of his rack, just unbelievably big and wide, and the only thing I would count is I couldn't even. He looked like a big typical 6x5 with a lot of little kickers, a lot of long kickers, extra points. I love drop tines, and that was one thing I did notice as I walked up to him, that he had drop tine. Well, when I finished counting the number of drop tines, this buck he had 8 drop tines. Now, the most I've ever shot with drop tines before is a buck that had 3 drop tines, and that was killed, oh my gosh, just off the Mexican border down in Maverick County years and years ago. A buck that I hunted for several years, one that I finally shot when he was 13 years of age. Well, finally, we get all the photographs taken. Dusty helps us load this deer. We go back to camp, and there's a lot of oohing and ahhing when we get there. And the beauty of it is that basically they take care of everything. And I'd asked them and told them, I said, y'all can gut him. I said, that's the one thing. And I want to look for bullet performance because I wanted to see what that 22 caliber Creedmoor had done with that 80 grains. And it had just destroyed that shoulder. It took out the spinal cord and all that other kind of good thing. No wonder the deer went down and couldn't go anywhere. But it wasn't until that afternoon that I had told them they could gut him. We'd set him up for photographs, and then that next day I caped him. And after I had caped him and taken the antlers or the skull off to get it ready for the taxidermist to take it to double nickel taxidermy, and those guys do a fabulous job, I have to tell you. That's when I finally had a chance to count all the points. When it was all said and done, I had counted 44 points over an inch long. He was a 6x5 basic typical frame. He did have 7 or 8 drop tines, actually had a drop tine from a drop tine, so that made the 8th drop tine. And I knew he was wide. He was probably about 22 or 23 or so inside, but I wanted to see what he was greatest outside. So I laid his antlers so that they were vertical so that I could get a good measurement from the ground to another level where I put a box to, so I could actually measure the entire spread. The outside spread came out to be 37 and a little bit, almost 37 and a half. By far the widest whitetail deer outside spread I'd ever taken. I've taken a couple of them that were right at 30, and talking about one of them that was almost at 30 inches without a kicker, just main beams, and then a couple of 3 others that were a little over 30 inches wide outside. But then while everybody else went hunting that afternoon, after finishing up everything I needed with the cape, get it in the freezer and that kind of thing, finishing the paperwork, I did score him. And his antlers grossed, if you scored them on a Boone and Crockett system, they scored 357 and a little bit of change. Now, I've never taken a whitetail deer anything close to that, but I have taken 2 bull elk and 2 red stags that scored better than that. So if you can imagine the difference between a whitetail deer and a red stag and a really big elk, score-wise, those were as big or bigger, which to this day I can't believe. Now, I know a lot of folks are going to say, yeah, Larry, you shot this in a high fence. It was probably a breeder type deer and all this. And I'm going to agree with you. You're right. I did. I love hunting low fence. That's basically the only place I hunt a high fence of any kind is there on the Choctaw, because even though there's a fence there, those deer are very elusive. Those animals there are very elusive. And in this instance, I'd been in the hospital and in and out at emergency rooms for over a month. And honestly, I didn't know how long I was going to be able to hunt or even if I was going to hunt. And like I said, too, with this particular deer, I never knew what kind of antlers he had until after I shot him. I knew that Dusty and Jesse would not tell me to shoot if it wasn't a sizable deer with good antlers. So, I'm going to have him mounted, of course, as I mentioned, with the double nickel taxidermy by their absolutely fantastic artists. Put him on the wall, and every time I look at him, I'm not going to remember that he was shot in a high fence. What I'm going to remember is the circumstances involved with that hunt, the people I was with, the things that preceded it, for me to be able to actually even get to hunt this year, and all those other kind of good things. So if somebody wants to get mad at me or fuss at me for shooting a deer behind a high fence, I guess that's their perspective or prerogative or whatever the proper term is. But to me, it's more about what that animal created in a relatively short period of time, all the glory of anything having to do with that rack that buck has and produced, that goes to the deer. It doesn't go to me. I've just happened to be the lucky person that got to pull the trigger on him and to put him on the wall and preserve that one individual, totally limited to one-time set of antlers. You talk about a one-time piece of art. there'll never be another one just like him. So to me, the glory and everything that's concerned about the size of this buck really just kind of goes to the deer. With me, I'm not going to, I'm very appreciative of the deer. I'm very appreciative of the hunt. And I know I'll never shoot a bigger one. That's the one thing for certain. I'll try to get some photographs up, and there's some stories floating around as well too. That I did one for Sporting Classics, and basically tells the same story that I told you here. Have one on my website as well too, my LarryWeisoon.net, and probably do 2 or 3 more about it as well too. And again, whatever the antlers are in this deer, the glory goes to that animal rather than to me pull the trigger. I'm just appreciative of the fact that I got to spend some great time with dear friends, with Dusty and Jesse and Jim Bequette and some of the other guys here in camp. And when I look at that mount on the wall, it's going to be those guys that I remember and remember not shooting. I remember pulling the trigger on a deer I had not yet seen. Now, I was very fortunate there, but I was also very fortunate health-wise in that most everything I think is taken care of this time. The pericarditis could possibly come back. I surely hope it doesn't. I'm still recovering from not being able to walk like I want to in terms of distance, in terms of being weaker and getting out of breath sooner. So I've had to adapt how I hunt. Now, this year, too, I was in on a lease in a county called Montague County. It's in Nakona, Texas. It's right on the Oklahoma-Texas border up northwest of Fort Worth, Texas. Red River is our north boundary. Now, one of the reasons I got in on this lease is because I thought it would be so cool to sit on the bank or just off the bank of the Red River on the Texas side and rattle a buck, a whitetail buck, out of Oklahoma, have him cross the river and come to Texas, and that's where I'd shoot him. So I knew the rut was getting close, so that week before Thanksgiving, weekend before Thanksgiving, if you will, I spent time up there, found me a spot that I could sit not too far off the river and where there was a trail coming across the river. And where the deer were coming out of Oklahoma into Texas. Now, the property that we have leased, I'm on the lease with Paul Moore and his son Colin and Ricky Ballinger and several other acquaintances and friends, and they're involved with Vineyard Max. I had gone in this area 2 or 3 days early and just put out several different piles of Vineyard Max, trying to pull some deer in there, and not so much to try to shoot them or bait them. I just wanted to hopefully grab some deer to come across and maybe stay there. So it was a cool morning. Rattled up several bucks. The bucks were coming to horn. Most of them were small. Rattled in a couple of them, including one that had his entire left antler broken off down to the base, and basically a big fork remained on the other side, and you could see where he'd broken off several points on that side. And again, we'll have that sequence on Sportsman's Life TV show. Probably before or by the time that you actually get a time to hear this. But sat there and rattled and off and on about every 40 minutes or so from daylight and saw several bucks chasing does, bucks coming to horn, bucks coming within about 5 or 6 feet of me kind of thing, to where I had the camera cranked back as far as you could go just to get most of them in the film, or most of them on film in front of the camera. About 11 o'clock, it started getting a little cooler, so I very quickly walked back to where I left my little Jeep and grabbed a heavier jacket and walked back in there to sit down, because I was sitting on the ground and where I could see a portion of the river bottom and see this trail coming out of across the river from Oklahoma. And it just about, about just say 12 o'clock, straight up. Now, I'm one of those who believes very firmly in hunting middle of the day. Regardless of what all the research shows, that's my time of the day, particularly when there is no moon or when there is a full moon. And in this instance, it was basically a no moon night the night before. I'd seen deer move all morning long, not just at daylight. But at about a minute or so before 12, I started banging the antlers together. And I had just about completed the sequence when I looked up, and here comes a deer from the trail coming off the river in my direction, and immediately gets in behind a bunch of thick briar and blowdowns and all those kind of stuff, but I can see enough of him to know that he's obviously a mature deer. He's got a big neck. I could see his hocks at one point. The tarsal glands were just really dark. That to me is always an indication that a deer is at least 4.5 years of age down in our part of the country. So I knew this deer was mature, and I could see that his antlers were outside of his ears by a little bit. We have a legal limit of it has to be 13 inches inside to be a legal buck. And I knew this buck was at least that. He had at least 8 points, maybe a few more. His mass looked really good, particularly down around the base. And I could just kind of see this occasionally as he moved his head back and forth behind the briars a little bit, just like a wall of briars. And I rattled and I put the antlers down and I grabbed my rifle, had it on tripod or set it up on a tripod, and was trying to see if I could find a spot to put a bullet through all that mess. And he turned to walk away. And when he turned to walk away, I let him take several steps, and as soon as he did, I just started grunting at him, went, and guess what? He turned around, and here he came. And when he came this time, I noticed that just on his shoulder and looking straight at me, and with a very slight turn, so that if I could put a shot into his frontal shoulder, I would probably get heart and lung as well too. If I, again, proper placement. And I knew the rifle that I was shooting, which was the 7mm PRC with that 50mm scope from Stealth Vision, and the 175 grain Hornady ELD-X, it's superbly accurate. And I moved just so slightly to the gun to shift it a little bit because I could see a little window that was probably about maybe a 3x4 opening between just dense briar, and I put the crosshairs exactly right there and took a deep breath, let it all out. Thankfully, the buck had not moved. When the buck, he was there and just waiting for me to shoot, not knowing for sure what was going on. I don't think he could quite figure out. I pushed the safety forward, took a deep breath, let it all out, squeezed the trigger. At the shot, he bolted to the left. And when he bolted to the left, I very quickly bolted in a fresh round and was able to put another round into him. And he ran maybe about 20 yards and fell over, again, behind some really thick brush and blow down and all those kind of things that you expect down close to a river bottom. And again, I was kind of sitting right on the edge of all this. But I went over and checked him, made sure he was down, that he was dead. And then I picked up his back trail because I wanted to see if he actually crossed the river. And it took me a little bit of doing, but I finally figured out there was no question this deer had probably come across the river. Maybe he was in the river bottom. I'm talking about the bottom of the river bed, actually, in the river bed coming into Texas when he heard those antlers. But you could see where he had crossed, and I noticed too when I reached down, he was wet basically from his from just below his belly line. His both hind legs and both front legs were wet, and he'd crossed the water somewhere, and that's where he'd come from. To me, without a doubt, he'd come out of Oklahoma. Finally, thankfully, Ricky Ballinger was there, and Ricky sent a text, and he said, "You get him?" And I said, "Absolutely, yes, sir, I do." And he said, "Do you need some help getting him out?" And I said, "Please." And so Ricky brought over his ATV, and we had a devil of a time loading this deer. I mean, it was almost comical, and I'm still to the point where I can't lift like I used to, and so it's a fairly tall ATV, and every time we tried to pull him up on the back, the tailgate would close, and we weren't big enough or he wasn't wide enough in terms of his step. Ricky wasn't, so he could put foot and pull both kind of thing. But it took quite some doing. We finally got the buck loaded, took him back to camp after a bunch of pictures, and thankfully Ricky had helped me take pictures before we loaded him as well too, and got him back to our camp, put him on the scales, and he weighed 187 pounds intact. Now, probably with this, looking at how this buck was in body condition at the time, he was not run down, but he had obviously been running and chasing for a long time, and I would be willing to guess that he had lost at least 20, if not 30 pounds. So old deer probably weighed over 200 pounds before the rut started, but Oh my gosh, what a great hunt! What a fun deal in terms of being able to rattle a buck out of Oklahoma from or one state, have him cross a river, and then shoot him in your home turf. That's pretty special when you get right down to it, as far as I'm concerned. And that was a goal I'd set for myself earlier this year. Never really, I was anticipating it happening, but also had that little bit of doubt back there that goes, I'm not sure this will ever happen, but I got to try. So my 2 bucks so far this year, that buck probably ended up scoring about 145 or so. It was a basic 9-point with a couple of kickers and just absolutely beautiful old 6-year-old deer. My hunt there, with the exception of does, I'm going to go back in January and we'll have a late doe season to shoot some does on that property as well, too, with Luke Layton and Jeff Rice and Paul Moore. And oh my gosh, I'm anxious to see what that country will produce next year because, quite frankly, left some pretty darn nice young deer. We had a really good fawn crop, looks like 2 and 3 years ago, and particularly 2 years ago and a year ago. And there are going to be a lot of bucks up there again next year, and those bucks walk up and down that river bottom area and across that property, and they cross and back and forth from in Oklahoma as well too. So maybe next time I'm going to be able to sit there and watch this buck come across the Red River out of Oklahoma, cross into Texas, and then take him after he gets there. But great hunt with great people, great fun. That one, too, I've written up several times, and it, too, parts of it will appear on the Sportsman's Life, which is, I mentioned several times, our YouTube channel, but also on Carbon TV. Jeff Rice puts that together, and Jeff and Luke Clayton and I co-host that particular show as well, too. Before we close this thing out, I want to wish everybody good luck the rest of the year, no matter where you're hunting or what you're hunting. But also I want to remind you, too, that the DSC convention is coming up in January. I'm sorry, in February. It used to be in January. This year it's in February. And it's again at the World Congress Center there in Atlanta, Georgia. And this year it's a 3-day show. It's going to be the 6th, 7th, and the 8th of February. So there's plenty of time to make plans to be there. It's going to be an absolutely fabulous show. And if for some reason you can't get to Atlanta, and we surely hope that you do, remember you can bid on so many different things as far as hunts are concerned on online hunting auctions. Just go there and look up the DSC convention in February in Atlanta, and you can bid there. But also, I want to remind folks that we're going to have another show again in Texas in July, and again, it'll be held at the Gaylord there in Grapevine, just outside of Dallas. So, if you can't make the one in February in Atlanta, please consider coming to the one in July. Both great shows. We're expanding the show in terms of numbers of booth in both places. So. Going to be an absolutely fabulous show. And if you want to learn more about either of those shows, you can go to www.biggame.org or www.dscf.org. That's our DSC Foundation website. Lots of good things to be found there as well. And again, invite you to view some of the things we talked about on our YouTube channel, A Sportsman's Life, and then also on our TV show that runs weekly on Carbon TV, A Sportsman's Life. Look forward to hearing from you. I'd love to hear what you think about all those kind of good things. Got some real good things coming down the pike here on our website. On our website, my website, LarryWeisoon.net. Please go there. But got some really good things. Got some super announcements coming up here, hopefully in the not very distant future, regarding my podcast about some of the things we're going to be doing, and looking at adding some different things that we can do, too, to where our listeners can have their names put in a pot, and we'll try to draw regularly for some books and a few other things. Who knows? Somewhere down the way, if I can find a place to take somebody hunting, we may even offer a hunt as well, too, for those who listen and submit their names or tell me what the last episode was about or something that I mentioned, so that really kind of know that you are listening to it. And if you don't, I'll even throw your name in the pot anyway. So look forward to coming back and telling you more stories about recent bucks getting ready with my Taurus handguns to go on a hunt in northeast Texas on the Becker Bottom Ranch, and then going on from there to hunting the little Carmen Mountain whitetails out in far west Texas, down in the Shinati Mountains. Those are interesting animals, interesting deer. Arguably the smallest whitetail subspecies, or at least close to the key deer, and going to be hunting javelina there as well too, and then from there going back up to see my old good buddy Craig Archer up around Snyder on a hunt that he and I are doing together for whitetail deer, and then hopefully home in time for Christmas. So hopefully your hunting schedule is fuller than mine, and you're little bit by little bit you're starting to fill up that freezer for absolutely great year of coming as far as great meals concerned from venison. So appreciate each and every one of you. Love to hear from you, and want to invite y'all right back here to our campfire again next week. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
DSC's Campfires with Larry Weishuhn has also been brought to you by The Crown Bar in LaGrange, Texas, the Texas Wildlife Association, Double Nickel Taxidermy, and Burnham Brothers Game Calls.